Surprise! I know that I have not given a review for The Real Housewives of Potomac this season in like a month, and quiet as it's kept because it just has not been giving. But we are here now, and I actually enjoyed this most recent episode, and I actually took a lot of notes. So we start off, it's like a Mother's Day episode, which I'm not mad at. And at the outset, just hearing that, I'm like, okay, are we about to get our first substantive episode of the season? Like, OMG, I've been waiting all my life. And so, we get a clip of Karen and Raven. They're going to get tattoos to represent, Karen's mom, which I thought was super cute. We then jump over to Candace and her mom, and Candace is planning for this Mother's Day event for the group. And this already makes me feel good because obviously, there have been the murmurs in the street, and Candace has been doing press talking about how basically it feels like she's being pushed out of the show. That's kind of been the talk since the beginning of the season. And I don't typically do like I'll talk about it on social medias, but I don't typically make content about the blogs and stuff like that and the tea as of right now. I just kind of stick to the shows, and whatever happens in between, we just kind of touch on. I'll touch on it briefly. I agree. I do feel like the beginning of this season was a plot and a ploy to kind of further isolate Candace and Wendy, because it's kind of been ongoing now for the last couple seasons, and I feel like they thought that it was going to maybe possibly be the nail in the coffin. And typically when I say they, the English class in me likes to clarify, and the law school in me likes to clarify who the they is. I'm going to keep the they vague, both because I don't know who the powers that be are right now that are working to do it, but I do feel like there are a lot of people. So I'm going to keep the they vague for right now. So I think that they were working continuously to push Wendy and Candace out, and I think that specifically the beginning of this season was being used as a ploy, and the employment of Nneka was being used in this ongoing and maybe final stage of pushing and further icing Candace and Wendy out from this group. And they spent the first half of the season on it, and it was such a big old flop, and we've heard about it from everybody. So now they are rerouting the episodes, and while extremely late, still a really good episode. And part of that, why I went into that, is because it's surprising to see Candace is planning not only the first substantive group event of this season, which is more than halfway over, but it turned out to be the nicest event. And I didn't even make that note initially because I'm obviously a Candace girl, and I try my best not to do the whole bias thing when I'm doing reviews. It's going to play a part because it's my opinion, but I try not to ride on that because I just don't think it's flattering. I'm not doing it for anybody but myself. I just don't think it's a flattering way to do reviews. And so I didn't make a note about how nice I really thought the event was until I saw it being such a huge topic of conversation. So it's like obviously everyone is seeing what I see, but I don't want to digress too much. It's relevant, but I don't want to jump into that too much. But I said what I said, and I'm sure we'll get to talk more about that later. Candace and her mom are talking about the party, and I had assumed kind of, and I thought it would have been nice, and this is no slight to Candace at all because I'm going to give my opinion on that. I thought it would have been nice, since this is the real first substantive group event, and it did turn out to be a very nice event. I thought it would have been nice to have everybody, just for the sake of showing, okay, we've turned the corner on this whole season and it's getting better, and we get to see the whole cast there. That's not Candace's job, in my opinion, but I think it would have been nice to see it. But in saying that, obviously, it turns out she's talking to her mom about it, and she's not inviting Giselle, which I think it's fine. It didn't surprise me, but I guess I went into this conversation assuming that it was going to be all cast because we really needed it. Again, that's not Candace's job, though. And so her choice was that she's not inviting Giselle, I think for extremely obvious reasons. So fine, I hope Giselle has a great Mother's Day at home. And then she's also not going to invite Robin. But her mom does urge her to have a conversation with Robin, which I thought was nice. And Candace has been saying in every single episode ad nauseum that she is still open to having this conversation with Robin, contrary to what we think about her relationship with Robin. And so I get that's gonna occur, I guess. We then move on to talk about Wendy's new show that she's working on, and she lets us know that she, parted ways with the previous producer because that producer wanted 50% ownership of the product, and obviously that's a little bit weird. So it's nice to at least hear that tidbit. It doesn't necessarily add any drama, but it is personal story. It's her own personal drama. So I like that they at least kept that tidbit in there because it gives us enough of the story to move forward. It's touch and go, and that's the personal story that we've been missing. So again, now we've gotten more personal story from Candace, and that she's planning this event and where she's at with the whole Giselle and Robin thing, and she's also filming with her mom because we're not attacking her and trying to, I won't even use that word, because we're not being strategic and trying to ice her out of the show. And now we can do the same with Wendy. It's kind of like a catch up, kind of like an extra credit. We can give her some personal story, and we could talk about her business ventures because we're not trying to ice her out of the show anymore. The plot has changed. And also, I don't want to touch on this right now, but it's so heavy on my heart that I have to say it. I've been thinking about it a lot. If you just think, I'll just pose it, and then we'll talk about it when the time comes, maybe around the reunion. Think about where we started this season and how they started off the storylines, the limited storylines of Wendy and Candace, and think about how they dropped as the season went on so that we could work on isolating them, and think about how now we're picking them back up. So now, Wendy's talking about her new venture, her show, which she obviously has already started. If you guys have seen it pop up on YouTube, and that it actually is really good. So I like that we're getting that personal story back as well. We move on, and again, another piece is, it's funny that we got this in sequence. We're getting to see actual personal story of Nneka, because now she's not being used as a ploy to isolate Wendy. She's actually being used for what she should have been used for, and that's that she's a new housewife, and we need to know who the hell she is and why the hell she's here. Is that clear yet? No. But I did appreciate being able to go see her, shop with her sister. The furniture to me looked a little bit tacky, if I'm going to be honest. So hopefully that was just a store that they stopped in, and that's not the look that she was going for. But I guess we'll see. But it was nice to hear them talk about, the fact that I guess her sister was making a comparison and saying she's a lot like her dad, and she likes to work hard and kind of overachieve was the sense of the conversation that I was getting. And I like to hear Nneka talk about how her dad, grew up with nothing, and he did everything and worked hard, and that's why he has, the fruits of his labor now. Those are things that we should have learned 4,700 episodes ago, but I'm always open to learn. So great. We move on and get a really good, what I thought was a really nice housewives scene, and it's just Giselle and Karen out to lunch with their daughters. Again, we're going with the whole Mother's Day theme, and they're out, with Raven and with what's her Grace is her first daughter's name. Is that correct? Yes, Grace. So, yeah. So, it was nice to hear them talk about that. And I like to get, again, that goes with personal stories. So you get a background of how they know each other and how their daughters are familiar, And Karen talks about the Jack and Jill thing of how her and Giselle have met. And they talked about that before. And people of color are probably not necessarily familiar with Jack and Jill. So I like the brief explanation that Karen was able to give us, even though we've heard about it before. And I like that they harked back into the cookie bake story that they talked about before. Like, that was fun. And then that, I feel like for a viewer that has watched the show through all these seasons, and you've heard these things before, and you start to remember these things, and then you even get a flashback to the cookie bake conversation that they had seasons ago, you start to remember, like, oh my gosh, look at where Giselle and Karen came from, right? Like, from the beginning, and the funny, beef that they used to have back and forth, and the frenemy thing that they used to have. It's fun to see that, and then you get an extra layer of it because they're there with their daughters, and you don't really get that type of interaction. So I thought that was fun. And I thought it was nice to see, Raven and Grace be able to talk about college and talk about that experience. That's stuff in Housewives that you want to see. So I definitely appreciated that as well. This scene kind of caught me off guard when, Robin was with. I do also really enjoy seeing Robin film with her sons because I don't know, just their personality is fun to me. And I think it's fun watching. I don't really care for Robin, but it is fun watching Robin be a mom. Like, you can just kind of tell, reading between the lines and watching these scenes, that she really enjoys that time with her family. So that's fun. So I will say that. And, in this scene, it did surprise me to see, Candace inviting her to invite her to the and texting her to invite her to the Mother's Day event. So I thought that that was cool, and it was nice to hear. We don't necessarily hear a lot of positive things come from Juan, but it was nice to hear him say, that basically urge Robin, not necessarily urge, but just say like it would be a good idea to have a conversation and hear Candace out and see what happens. So I thought that that was nice. But I do also appreciate the context of hearing, because I guess you could have assumed, but again, the plot was somewhere else at the beginning of the season. I'm not going to keep harping on it, but I'm just saying you should definitely be able to notice from this episode that they're picking up so many dropped pieces, and not even necessarily dropped, just like didn't care about discarded pieces, because there was another plot at the beginning of the season, I believe, and a lot of people believe, allegedly. And now we're back to personal story 2 episodes before the reunion. I'm being dramatic, but you know what I'm saying. So it's interesting to at least get the context, because we've had the episodes where we could have just assumed, but it's nice to hear Robin say, she was fine with leaving things where they were when they did that unnecessary group trip that Ashley hosted wherever the hell they went that I don't remember. She doesn't feel like she needs an apology from Candace. She doesn't really feel like there's conversations to be had. I didn't think too much into it, because I think like a lot of people, we just feel like Candace should drop that bone and be done with it. Like, don't be friends with Robin. I think it was very clear from last season that people didn't really feel like Robin was a good friend to Candace. I also understand that there's a relationship that was had off camera. Candace talks about it a lot, and Robin has kind of echoed it a little bit, at least in the reunion last year. So I can understand that as well. Like, there's definitely more than what we see on camera. So I kind of understand why Candace is still kind of carrying that with her and trying to figure things out. But I'm with the masses. Like, I'm a viewer, and I'll have to go off what I see. And I just don't feel like, I don't feel like Robin is necessarily a friend to Candace on the show. And then when it counts, aside from, sticking up for Chris early in last season, okay, great, you've gotten those flowers. We've talked about that. I'm ready to let that go. But then also, I think that, I don't think that your friends, who they're friends with, it has to dictate what your relationship is going to be. But I do think Candace has finally said it now. I do think it makes sense that, it would be weird to be friends with somebody that's friends with Giselle. Like, I just don't know that I think that that's possible. And so, I kind of understand. Move on to Ashley. And I'm going to assume, because we were touching on everybody in like a motherly aspect. So and I really can't remember, to be honest with y'all. I'm going to assume that she was either with Sheila or talking about Sheila. I don't remember what she was doing, because the only note that I have is that this little pixie cut on Ashley is awful. Like, that new confessional that she has, I just think it's absolutely terrible. And that's really the only note that I had. Sorry. So we get to the event, and it's gorgeous. The venue is gorgeous. I just feel like I'm watching a totally new season. Sorry, trying not to harp on it, but as I'm talking about it, it's just really coming out. Mia came in, and she looked fantastic. I'm jumping ahead, though, because Karen came in first. She looked gorgeous. So I'm like, the women look great. We've got a great venue. Looks like it's going to be a nice, party, and the episode's been way better. So I'm already just kind of like, okay. And I think at this point, I had tweeted like, wow, we're finally getting a real, like, substantive episode of Housewives with personal story, and it only took over half the season. Like, I honestly, and I know I keep talking about it a lot, because that's how taken aback I was. Like, it had really gotten to a point where I'm like, damn, I haven't posted a review for Potomac in over a month. And I'm like, that kind of makes me feel some type of way. And I'm like, I don't have anything to say. I'm not going to get on here and fake the funk. But I'm watching the episode as if like, damn, please give me something at least. Even if it's like a 3-minute. I knew that Robin, and honestly, I went into it knowing that Robin and Candace were going to be having a conversation. So I'm like, even if the episode sucks like the other ones have been sucking, I probably can get some type of conversation out of that. But I really did, to my surprise, enjoy the episode. That's why I keep harping on it. Maybe we can move forward. Maybe I've gotten it out. I did like getting the little bit of personal story from Mia too. Then is like, she's speaking on her mom not coming, because she did kind of mention it in passing that her mom wasn't coming. And I'm wondering, like, well, that's been a part of the show. We've talked about her mom, her relationship with her mom, and where it kind of left off, we kind of knew, right? It was still rough. So I'm wondering if she's going to talk about it, even though it was brief. And Mia does have so much else going on. I guess her storyline is in a different place this season. I do like that she was able to at least give a small update and say she still feels like things are not, much better with her mom, but she has a lot of other stuff going on. So I thought that that was fine. Do I think that narrative needs to be pushed forward later? Yes, because her storyline is getting a very repetitive with the whole Gordon thing and the financial thing. I feel like I get it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, what's next? And I don't think that your storyline needs to be this one linear thing where it's like, well, we're only talking about the fact that Gordon wants to sue family for money. I think that they could definitely weave in the mom thing. Obviously, you can't make it happen. So, if there's no content there, there's no content there. But I think that Mia could definitely have a little bit more substance to her. So, I'm hoping that they could push that forward. I thought it was interesting that Wendy wasn't going to be able to make it. Obviously, the reasoning given by Wendy and kind of supported by Candace was that Wendy had this event for her book, which also ironically involves her mom. And it kind of takes us back to a storyline from a season or two ago, which is nice. I like referencing, you know what I'm saying? So she wasn't able to come, but then we kind of get some, which I enjoy. We get some opinion from Candace, which you could tell she was like, why are you making me do this, girl? But she's like, I feel like Wendy really didn't come because she didn't want to be around Nneka. And then obviously Nneka asked about it a little. I'm jumping a little bit forward, but Nneka asked about it a little bit later, like, oh, Wendy's not coming. And Ashley also gave her, her input, which took it a little bit further. Ashley's thought process usually doesn't take things forward for me, but they did this time, so that was interesting. And she said maybe it was a good idea that Wendy and her mom were not in the same room with Nneka given the circumstances, because Ashley admits, which is one of the smartest things she's ever said, that she's not as mature, and she definitely would have brought her mom there, and her mom definitely would have called them out. So it's probably a good idea that Wendy had the discernment not to do that, and I'm like, I would have to agree. I know a lot of the girls meaning viewers, don't really care for Charisse, but she definitely came in and was working. You know what I'm saying? She came in, she had a conversation with Mia, she let Mia know that she had spoken, and seen Jacqueline at some event, and Nneka was there, and Nneka kind of chimes in her confessional. She's talking about how, Jacqueline was there, and she didn't have very kind things to say about Mia. Both Charisse and Nneka said that, and obviously Nneka was prompted in her confessional to talk about it a little bit, and I just found it was obviously a very brief synopsis of it, and it seemed like she wasn't necessarily trying to go into it, and I just found that to be so interesting, because I'm like, you were ready and rearing to go with this whole Wendy storyline about Facebook and shrines, but as it pertains to a storyline that occurred on this show just last season, you've had a conversation with one of the parties involved about the other party involved that's still currently here on this show that you're coming on, and you have absolutely nothing to say about it. So I thought that that was pretty interesting. And moving forward in Charisse's work, Charisse asks the questions that need to be asked that for some reason nobody else has been asking. It got asked once, but Ashley, what's going on with your divorce? Why are you dragging your feet, essentially? And Ashley's kind of like smirking through it as she does, and she's just like, I'm just not ready to sign the papers yet. And I wrote down in quotes what she was saying. Doesn't feel the urgency right now, right? And she says, it's gonna feel too final. And I think that I also tweeted at this point, like, there's feels something very like bummy or like bum-ish that Ashley wants to remain married to this man just for the financial security that it gives her, because obviously given the divorce, you come up with some type of agreement for finances, and it's not going to be the same as how it currently is. And I just think that that's something that nobody's calling out, and Ashley always has so much to say about other people, but she is openly staying in a marriage and choosing not to sign, from what she's describing, what she's characterizing, choosing not to finalize her divorce because she wants to make sure she still has Michael's coins. That's a bit interesting. So even though that was a very short segment and the girls, again, don't necessarily care for Charisse, at least she came to work. I don't know if she got a producer's note, but if she did a fantastic job. And this is obviously what we're going to need her for going forward. She might need to keep coming back because these are questions that nobody else is asking, because again, the plot used to be different and this line in the sand was drawn, and the objective was just to ice out characters on this show and not to really talk about real storylines. So thank God for Charisse for giving us that tidbit of information, let's just be honest. As we're moving forward, I believe it was Karen who asked, about Robin coming, and I did I always listen to, because I know Candace can be very reactive, and she says that as well, and so whenever she's speaking, I always listen to her tone and kind of how she's going with it. She seemed very calm and in a good space, and happy to just say, she reached out to Robin. Robin sent her a text message to say she didn't think it would be the right forum or venue for them to, come together in front of the group, at this event, and things are not good. So they should, I don't remember who suggested that they should talk separately, but that's going to be the next plan of action. So I appreciated that, and I'm fine with that. And obviously we knew the conversation was coming, but we didn't know under what context. So I like that these were the steps that led up to it. It felt very productive, whereas the conversation, obviously, I won't even say the conversation wasn't productive. Actually, I feel like it actually was, but we'll get to that. And then saying that, I will say I really, really enjoyed, because we haven't talked in a while, I really, really love Karen's new confessional look as well. Hated Ashley's already said that, but really wanted to say it again and might say it another time. And I really, really love Candace's new confessional look. It gives me very Ariana Grande, Last Era by the hair, and the dress. I just think it's super cute. Boom. And then we also learned briefly that Karen, these are the little things that I feel like you can throw into these types of episodes. This episode for me was so informational, right? And these are storylines that you can build upon, for however long that we still have. It's stuff that we should have started with, but now that we're here, let's talk about being here. Not tell me what it was, tell me what's now. So, we can build upon these things, so fine. And we learned that, Karen is going to Surrey County because she's, working on something there, like she told us earlier this season, but that plot was dropped. And, she's not going to invite all of the ladies because the insurance is too high and they don't know how to act. And I'm grateful for that, honestly, because I don't want to see an all-cast trip to Surrey. I don't mind watching them go to Surrey, fine. And from the previews, the group that was chosen seemed to have been strategically chosen, producer-wise chosen, and it seems like it's going to produce really good results and really good television and really good context and even some substantive television and talk and dynamics. So I'm excited to see that. I have high hopes for it. However, before I even know that, just thinking about it, I'm not disappointed that the whole new group's not going, because I don't want an all-cast group trip event to Surrey County. I don't ever want to see that. So moving on to the Candace and Robin link up. I do like that Candace came in and said, she's just coming to listen and she wants to hear what Robin's thing is, because, obviously her question is, it's not being articulated well, which is what bothers me, but it seems like her question is, why is Robin so upset with me? Because I was only doing what the rest of the world was doing. I do think that's a very, and I'm a Candace girl, but I do think that's a very base level description of it for somebody that is very articulate and very well at, explaining her feelings and her process of things. So I'm wondering if there was more and it was just clipped poorly. But that description of it, which gets said a lot in the show, everybody else was doing it, so I don't see the problem with me doing it. Does it have merit? Absolutely. But standing alone is just not a good reasoning. And so I already come in kind of uneasy on the side of Candace, still on the side of Candace, but it's just not a strong side. Before I give my assessment, I'll go through the conversation. And, the another big point of it was, Robin basically, she just said, I feel like it's self-explanatory. She didn't really give much more context, which I think lends itself to my assessment of it and a lot of other people's assessment of it in the end, but we'll get there. And Candace basically says, well, I wasn't saying any of those things to offend. And that took me back a little bit more, because I'm like, that's also just a very basic thing to say, because what do you mean you weren't trying to offend her? You need to kind of spell that out for me. And that kind of made me feel like some pieces are not being put together by somebody, right? Either Candace is not explaining it well, or it's not being edited well, or, the conversation is not being shot. I don't know. But the pieces are not going together, because first you're saying, everybody else is doing it, so I was doing it, but I wasn't trying to offend. There's merit in both of those, but it's not being explained well, but I'll put it into my assessment. But that's happening in this conversation, and I'm very just I don't feel like I have anything to work with on the side of Candace. And Robin hasn't given me anything, because she's like, well, I feel like it's self-explanatory. I just don't want you talking about, myself and my husband. Where we start to get the meat of it is, and I loved this. I thought that this was fantastic. Oh my God, like I wish we would have gotten this a long time ago. It's Robin saying, I'm not going to throw my husband under the bus for the sake of entertainment, basically for the show. Breaking that third wall and saying, alleging this is something that we went through and we were over it by the time that we filmed. She said that ad nauseum to her credit. But explaining more and saying, I'm not going to just use that and say, well, this did happen. Even though it's relevant, even though it's reality TV, she felt as though she was not going to use that to be her storyline because that's just going to throw Juan under the bus and give everybody an opportunity to read Juan, and she didn't feel like she needed to do that. That argument has merit, and that's something that I want to hear, right? And while I may not necessarily agree with it on all points, that's stuff that we need to hear, and I wish that we have heard it, I had heard it a long time ago. And it seems like even Candace was very receptive to this, so I'm wondering if she had received all of that context prior, but whatever we move. And Candace's response is very short and sweet, very spot on, but we're on a reality TV show. And that reminds me that the premise of this whole issue between the Candace and the Robin thing and why this even happened, even with Candace barking on social media about it, is that, Robin did that whole paywall thing behind Patreon. It was like, well, yes, that thing did happen, and I'll explain it on Patreon. And so then it pieced together for me and my assessment, Candace's thing wasn't necessarily against Robin and Juan. It wasn't necessarily to have an opinion about Robin and Juan. The issue was your best friend Giselle is using stuff against Karen, using stuff against Wendy, using stuff against my husband, stuff that's for her husband specifically very damaging and something that can be taken to like the court of law. Obviously people played with the definition of sexual assault last week when Candace did her thread, and she was 100% right in what she was saying, but we're not going to clock that tea. But everybody tried to play with the semantics of it because they wanted to disagree with Candace, but Candace has said nothing wrong. And so the stuff that Giselle did was absolutely 100% wrong as it pertains to everybody, and especially to Chris and Candace. And Robin was kind of complacent in it, whether she was involved or not, and we'll discuss that in my assessment. But so the root of it is you had this stuff going on, but you let your friend play along with this narrative, and then you play with it, and you're like, but I'll discuss it on my own terms on my Patreon. That caused Candace to be reactive and emotional, and so she starts, as a result, going in not only on that situation, but also on, yes, Robin and Juan, because it's related. And I think anybody can relate to that. Like, just because you get upset by something, she's not going to go off and like talk about, oh, well, I hate Patreon and Patreon's not a great place, and girl, you could have did it on the show. Bravo's a better. I'm just making stuff up. But basically keeping the box of the argument to Patreon versus Bravo. You're going to talk about the related things and say, girl, you're wrong for not bringing this to the show. You're wrong for not talking about it on Bravo. But also, as it relates to you and Juan, like, that's a fool. Like, you look stupid. You're going to go off and do those things because you're upset. That's what people do. So it started to make sense to me when Candace was like, well, I didn't do it to offend you, because it means it wasn't specifically about you and Juan. Like, it really wasn't. Y'all were casualties in it, absolutely. And yes, I did talk my stuff, but again, to her second point, well, it was her first point, but it came, it's a secondary point. Everybody was saying it. So now both her points make sense to me, and they kind of come together. Like, no, I wasn't doing it to offend you, because it was really kind of just about the whole Patreon thing. You were just a casualty and you had to catch those L's. And then also everybody else was saying it anyway. So it's not like I was bringing up new information and talking about new rumors and talking about new women. I was just throwing jabs where they fit. The shoe was fitting and I said what I said. So is it right still? Absolutely not. Like, obviously, there are still negative things about Robin, but I don't think that Robin has a great argument for, well, you're not a friend and you should have done that. And now this is the straw that broke Robin's back. Like, now Robin definitely can't be friends with Candace because she talked a little bit of mess on Twitter. Worse things have occurred, like 125%. Like, Ashley's been talking about your relationship with Juan since you guys stepped foot on the screen. Y'all good. So I would have to now understand where Candace is coming from. This came from me having to piece it all together and like see what people were saying on social media and listen to what was saying and read between the lines. So that's why I'm saying I wish that it had been described better. But I think what Candace is saying makes perfect sense. And if I'm right, which I could still be wrong, but if I'm right, I know I'm right because Candace said on Watch What Happens Live. Worse things have happened to Robin, right? So you're not going to tell me that all of a sudden me talking mess on Twitter as a result of what you did by taking this information and using it behind a paywall on Patreon is the worst thing that's ever happened in America, and now you can't be friends with me. So that's why it's like Robin can shut up. And that's why I feel like the conversation was productive. Like, yes, they ended up saying, okay, basically, we're not going to be friends. And Candace got up as she left. But that's productive to me. I feel like I learned some new information. I feel like they both got their piece out. I don't think there's any more to be said from either one of them. And I think it's dead in the water. I think it's done. So it was productive to me, and it worked for me. But the last big part of the conversation and a part of my like my analysis that I will say I disagree with Candace. I don't agree with her assessment that Robin knew of the plan or acted in the plan. I think that it would be more fair to say that Robin was sitting by and letting it happen, and she's friends with the ops. Like, those things are fine. I think it's fine to feel a way about that, but I don't think it's fair to say that Robin participated in it, because I don't know that I would say that. Again, it's not my experience, and Candace may know more than I do, but it's not my experience that Robin was in this plan and plot with Giselle. I would not have characterized it like that. Robin still bears fault because she was just kind of silent in it and rode the fence, and she's friends with somebody like that, fine. But I think Robin holds fault in other things too, like the weird speaker thing she did to Candace last season, how she was acting weird towards Candace at the reunion. She's shown other ways of not being supportive and being a friend to Candace, but I don't agree with the point of you acted along with this plot with Giselle. I don't agree with that. And that's the only point that I can really give Robin, besides please brush your hair before filming. That's it. So again, yeah, I think that, Robin gets the crumb of you defended Chris at the end of the season, beginning of the season, like, we get it, but everything else you did from there is a downfall. And I don't agree with, it didn't make sense to me until now, again, reading other people's analysis and learning more and really reading between the lines and sitting with it. I do feel like Robin is dragging it and wanting to have a reason to just not be cool with Candace. Do I feel like I will be upset with my friend, talking mess about my marriage and all this other stuff on Twitter? Yes. But in the grand scheme of things, I will realize that she was reacting emotionally, which is still not okay. I'm not saying it's okay. But Candace was reacting emotionally to the BS that I put out with my friend Giselle. I don't like the reaction, and that's the conversation that we come and have a conversation about as friends. But Robin has already chosen that she doesn't want to be friends, and fine, whatever. That's the gravity of it. That's the straw again that breaks Robin's back, where they have to go to the chiropractor as a family for Mother's Day like they did. Fine, girl, or the PT, whatever the hell it was. Fine. But I can't agree with that. So, I thought that this was a much, 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 much better episode, extra credit episode for the Real Housewives of Potomac. I'm hoping that they can just go better and better and better and save themselves towards the end of this season. I don't know. We'll see. But we're back for now. And I'm happy to be back. I enjoyed the episode. And let me know what y'all think in the comment section.